Hey folks, man, welcome back. I know things have been a little bit quieter in the news this last week or so. I'm gonna get started a little bit early because I know it's like about 5 minutes early. But I was writing, and I got a lot to get out there because I want to leave a little bit of time at the end too to talk if anybody wants to talk. So let me see if I can get through all this. It's a lot. Planning on turning this into a video series also. So if we don't hit everything, this is just the tip of the iceberg, really. So this is just a primer kind of on integral theory and integral politics and how it all kind of ties together. But yeah, I figured I'd take this chance since, usually we dig into things that have been happening in the world, kind of trying to pierce through the veil and look at, the big ideas behind it and the currents of history and everything. But that's not to say that there's nothing going on. There's still humanitarian crisis in Gaza, 13,000 people displaced due to evacuation orders. Um, you know, not really anybody's talking or doing anything about it. Everybody, all our political systems beholden to the big money contributions, so they can't come out and say anything. It reminds me too. I was during my time in the military, they briefed us on how the United States has plans to protect Taiwan if they are ever invaded by China. But still, the United States they don't recognize Taiwan officially as their own country. They, for political reasons, they consider them to be part of China, even though like behind the scenes they don't. So it's one of those kind of things, it's all just like this posturing, and they gotta, they can't screw themselves over by opposing Israel, or, so they'll just allow genocide to happen before they put that at risk. Just one of the problems with the whole left-right setup and the corporatism. But anyways, some of the other stuff that's going on, that people might have missed, that I might have missed if I didn't dig into some of this stuff, trying to figure out what wasn't going around on social media but was in the news. Sudan's government reopened their border crossing with Chad, which is a good thing because they were that was their main supply route to Darfur, where that ongoing crisis. It's been years, but they're in the middle of a drought right now too, so a lot of starving people, suffering people over there, who are going to be able to get a little bit of relief at least. In the whole Ukraine situation, they say that there's been 2,000 attacks on hospitals and healthcare facilities, which is insane. Like, first of all, it's a Geneva Convention's violation. Yeah, I don't know why we're not hearing about that as much. I mean, maybe some people are aware of it, but people are too busy, like freaking out about Demure and Mindful and QT and Brat Summer or whatever. And I don't know, social media just doesn't really hit on that a lot, at least in the circles that I'm, going around in, which a lot of them are political stuff. So, anyways, I don't know what the resolution of that situation is. Some people say like, oh, NATO, U.S. just needs to fuck off and leave. Stay out of the way. So stop antagonizing Russia and making them freak out and think that we're going to threaten their borders. Other people think we should do some kind of intervention, UN peacekeepers, or I don't know. I don't know what the solution is, but it's some terrible shit going on. The In Bangladesh, there was the end of this like 15-year reign of this regime over there. The leader got deposed. Some really good stuff happened over there during his time. It was weird because Bangladesh, like, if you know anything about Bangladesh, one of the most populated and poorest countries on the planet. So there were a lot of like deep poverty problems over there. But it's like it's great because when I was a kid, you used to hear about that stuff. All you see the videos and like adopt a child and all that kind of stuff. You still see that stuff some, but in that part of the world, like India, Pakistan, in those countries, it's not as big of a problem. There's been a lot. It's like a complex issue, and there's a lot of reasons why. It's not just because of this guy, but like for instance, microfinance has been a big help over there. Just charity work that people have done over there, like missionary work, donating to charities, humanitarian aid stuff. But anyways, there was a lot of reports of like election fraud and him just hanging on to power. So yeah, they finally just kicked him out of there, and now they're kind of working through that whole situation. So that's something interesting to keep an eye on if you're into that kind of stuff. Really a big deal, 15-year regime change, 15-year long regime, like coming out of power, and I didn't hear anything about it in the news anywhere. Anyways, speaking of progress, the one of the things I always like to bring up every once in a while, I post about it sometimes, is the fact that there's kids dying every day from starvation, malnutrition, related disease. And at the same time, the world produces enough food for that not to have to happen, more than enough. And it used to be when I first started becoming aware of this, it was about 20,000 kids every day, which is insane to think about. That's a packed stadium full of children every day. Now it's a little better. We got it down to about 8,200, which is still about 3 million kids a year. So yeah, that's an update on that. If anybody's like looking for ways to do something about that, one of the charities that I really believe in and think is a good charity and that I donate to is The Life You Can Save. I can post a link here for you. But I encourage everybody, to do your homework and look at what charities you think are trustworthy. You hear a lot about fraud and administrative fees and rich folks just using charity to get tax breaks and that kind of stuff. So make sure it's one that you think is doing the right things for the right reasons and not your money's going to a good place. You're not just making some rich people's lives easier. Anyways, like I said, United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization data says that the world produces more than enough food so none of those kids have to starve to death. And there's millions more that are affected with other diseases. The Life You Can Save is pretty cool too. They vet a bunch of charities and they can send you to other ones that help with other problems, like in developing countries. Like women who get like fistulas and things like that. Blindness, whatever, just disability stuff. If you want to contribute to those causes too. Anyway, so yeah, there's a lot going on. Not a lot of hyper momentum. And hey, what's up, brother? How you doing, man? Yeah, there's still a lot going on in the world. Just not a lot of hyper momentum around any big news stories or anything. Here in the last week or so. So I wanted to take this opportunity to talk about some of this stuff that it's been rattling around in my brain, and that I've been working on developing, like theory-wise, and just kind of saw a video from a philosopher that I follow on YouTube that just kind of threw me for a loop about political stuff and like radical traditionalists and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of throwing me off right now too. I want to explore some of that a little more in depth, but like I said, I'm planning on turning all this into a video series and exploring it together with all you guys. So feedback's welcome, comments are welcome. I'll take a few minutes at the end to have actual conversation, so I'm not just in like lecture mode. But yeah, so let's jump into it. What's up, Blake? How you been, man? Good to see you, bro. I hope you're doing well, man. I hope the family's well. Probably coming out there to Dallas, like November-ish. So it'll be cool to link up. Let me know if you'll be available, dude. Um, so yeah, I wanted to just dive right into this spiral dynamic stuff. I know Brady, I sent you some stuff. We were talking a little bit about it last night, but it's a psychological, sociological development model about human phases of development, emotional maturity, and really it's like about people's worldview, how your worldview changes over time. What's up, Tree? I'm glad you can be here. Especially because yeah, this I want to get your input on this, and you know, you're one of my you're one of my favorite people to develop this kind of stuff with. I really could use some feedback and like what you guys want to see from the videos, questions you have, and thoughts that you have about it. But anyways, it's spiral dynamics is a developmental model, and they talk about these. They call them V memes or value memes, and they use them the term meme like not as a joke. People they post memes on social media all day, and it's usually making fun of something or trying to hook people with some like rage baiting stuff or whatever. But they're using it in the original sense that Richard Dawkins, who, um, he's a controversial figure himself, but it's from his book, The Selfish Gene. He's the one who coined the term. And he was talking about it as like like a gene. It's like an idea that spreads from person to person in the same kind of way that genes do. Does it? Maybe I need to. Got some noise gating stuff going on. I got a new microphone, so I was hoping it would be better, but let me try to turn this off. Yeah, all right. Tell me if that's better, if I need to maybe turn the gain down a little bit. But yeah, anyways, so memes are these ideas that get passed from one individual to another. And spiral dynamics kind of latched onto that. It's rooted in the Maslow. Oh yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Oh, it's worse. Alright, how about now? Test, test, test. There, that should be better. It's probably picking up that fan. It's like it's pretty hot over here. I refuse to turn on the air conditioner because it's ridiculous how much it costs. Anyways, so he based it kind of on Maslow and a lot of others like Piaget, Kurt Lewin, Carl Jung, a lot of psychologists. But when we jump into it, you'll see how it's really kind of based in Maslow. And the whole concept of like these levels of meeting your needs, and then you can advance to the next level, kind of. So Graves' model is more focused on how different worldviews and value systems come up as we develop, and he shows that people in different social groups, even like whole societies, go through these phases. So, like I said, it was initially developed by him, Claire Graves, but later got expanded by a guy named Don Beck and Christopher Cowan. And they got some really interesting books. If you're into like audio books or you want to like check out any of their books, they wrote a lot of books about this. So let's take a look at the stages. Keep in mind that even though people like progress through these phases, it's not like there's a tendency to think about it like in a superiority inferiority way, where it's like I'm more advanced than you because I've got to this phase and that makes me smarter or something. And it's not really intended to be like that because so for instance, the first phase is like basically animal phase. Animals are pretty much exist in that phase for their whole life, but you can revert to that phase if your fight or flight kicks in or something. So it's not like they ever really leave you or you like transcend them and you're never going back because you're too good for that now. So that makes it kind of confusing and difficult to navigate because there's a tendency sometimes people want to form, like systems around these kind of like value judgments of, what people are. Like that's the whole like social construct shit with people argue about race, or you could pick out whatever. You could give people certain access to things by height. I mean, they do that at amusement parks, and so things like that. So like that's the pitfall to it. Like it's they're saying like try to not to do that to people, because you never know who's in what phase, and what their potential is or where they came from, whatever. Anyways, but yeah, thanks Drew for that. Should have turned that off. So I'm also gonna give some expected age ranges. Like you can look up, they got all these kind of diagrams and like infographics and stuff to try to help conceptualize these ideas, but sometimes they have like wildly different age ranges. So these are just like ballpark figures. It could be different. And then when they talk about the social cultural development, it's like over time more people get to higher levels just because of the way the whole thing works, the way like human consciousness development and awareness works. Like we're capable of a much higher level of awareness, especially with the internet and being able to look and see what's going on in the whole world now than people were 2,000 years ago. Let me switch to this real quick, because I do have something we can pull up. Yeah, this one might be a good one to start with. So this kind of shows, if you look at this left-right stuff, it kind of fluctuates back and forth from like a self-focus to a community focus. So it starts with beige, and beige is, like I was saying, it's like the animal kind of awareness, pre-conscious, subconscious, however you want to think of it. They call it survival sense, or here it says automatic instinctive. And the age range for it is 0 to 2 years. So it's basically your infancy, and represents like a primal, undifferentiated state of consciousness. You haven't really developed like a sense of self or self-awareness. And if you, I put in here these, Gene Gebser, one philosopher, he talks about this whole phases of human development. He calls them structures, consciousness structures, and he calls this the archaic structure. So he goes really deep into it. He looks at like art and just everything about humans, like that indicates that they thought of things differently, and their like level of consciousness was much different. The way that they viewed their place in the world and everything, and even at some point, the idea that we take for granted of this like self-talk, this internal monologue that we have, being us talking to ourselves, that there was a time where people didn't look at it that thought it was like ancestors or God talking to them and like guiding them. And anyways, so this is before any of that stuff happens, any of that stuff emerges. Like 100,000 plus years ago, when people were pretty much in survival animal mode. And like I said, there might have been some like early emergence of certain people into this like purple or red or whatever we're going to talk about next. But the majority of people at that time were in that phase, and they didn't advance beyond that phase. Eventually, people started to go into this next one, the purple, which is still like, it's really like family oriented. And for Claire Graves and the Spiral Dynamics, it's 2 to 6 years old, where you have like a real strong link to your parents and your family, and you don't really look at yourself as separate from them yet. You haven't really started exploring your own ego identity. And in the Gene Gebser like human consciousness development framework, he calls it the magical structure. It's like defined by animistic thinking. where it's basically the whole world is spirit, and it's all kind of like conglomerated together as one big unified thing. And that was up till around 50,000 years ago. So people, it's like tribal rituals, animistic beliefs, like people basically trying to do magic and, cast these spells to make sure that they, have successful hunts and those kind of things. And like I was saying, these things don't really go away. Like people, they try to differentiate themselves from that stuff and pretend like, oh, we're way smarter than that now. We don't believe in that superstition and all that. A lot of people do. A lot of people are drawn to it, and it's obvious with certain things like like crystal healing, or some people are still actually doing like Wiccan magic practice and stuff. But I think what's less obvious about it is how we have these kind of shared fictions that we create that really, for instance, like money is not real. It doesn't exist in the real world. It's like we made the idea up. But the idea, if you tried to pretend like money wasn't real, you would have a really hard time living life, because it's kind of like a magic spell that we've cast over ourselves by collectively believing in it. It has such power over us that it really dominates pretty much every aspect of our life and our behavior. Maybe not every aspect, but you know what I mean. Like it's pretty pervasive as far as like the impact that it has on it. So, like I was saying, this stuff never really goes away. It's kind of like a pyramid, with a foundation and then levels built on it, which was like the way Maslow originally drew all his stuff. Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Anyways, the next one goes into like ego development and like early impulsive self, and that's kind of later childhood, like older toddler up to like preteen. And like I said, this is not that's not like definitive by any means. Kids could start progressing into blue like much earlier if there's some kind of outlier or whatever. But this is the shift back towards self-focus and just like developing all that stuff, the individuation process, what Carl Jung talks about. And Gene Gebser calls this the mythical structure. It's like about developing the story and the narrative, and telling yourself the story of who you are and what your purpose is, and those kind of things. So in human history, this is this kind of area that's defined by like conquest and empire building, and really focused on like egoic power, dominance, like ancient empire building. In modern society, it manifests like in later childhood, like we were talking about, and kids start really like testing their boundaries and trying to assert their will and assert their selfhood to their parents, and to their families in the context of their family or their tribe, which is another interesting thing to think about, like how the dynamics of all that stuff has changed over time. The tribe, the family size was quite a bit bigger in the past, and it's shrunk pretty significantly over time. And I think that it ties into all this. There's reasons like why that happened that we could probably investigate here soon. The next one is blue, and it's kind of like a usually religious society built on a bunch of rules and like rigid structuring. So it makes sense too, like as societies grow and get bigger, you need some kind of like community focused structuring, and it's a lot about, so think about it too, how it like builds on itself. So whereas everybody in purple was like, they weren't even at the point of questioning any of this stuff, they're just born into this like conglomerate of people, and they don't really distinguish themselves from it in that kind of animistic worldview. a tribalistic worldview. It's all about like safety and keeping each other safe and helping each other, and people just kind of did that instinctively. This like hunter gatherer era, and moving into red, like now they have this sense of self, but then there's a need to like control that because it's just a bunch of people trying to assert their dominance in society, and that's not going to work out very well. Like it was way more common for violence and those kind of things to happen in these societies back then, so the violence like decreased over time because of a lot of this like blue meme stuff where the religious values started coming in. They're like, hey, our society's not going to survive if we're murdering each other and like raping each other's wives and stuff, so we should maybe not do that. So a lot of that like develops in this time. And in the sense of the individual development stuff, it's about like from 10 to 20 years. And the focus is on order and authority, creating and adhering to structure and following a rule-based order, which you see as a good thing. A lot of kids get this through school too, like public school or private school, whatever it is. So people start to try to like find their place in the system. How do I fit into the system? And what am I supposed to be doing inside of this system that I'm trying to learn about? And Gene Gebser, he calls this like the very early emergence of the mental structure, I think he would say. So the mental structure is like where the emergence of philosophy is also, and the logical linear thinking, the birth of that. And like philosophy is distinct from the myth stuff, and as far as like the way that it tried to explain. There's a lot of really interesting things in Gebser about how the myth structure worked and how people came to see. Where in the magical and like animistic thinking, it's a little more like one and unified. In the mythical, people start to recognize dichotomies and put a lot of emphasis on cycles, like light and dark, life and death, day and night, seasons, those kind of things, and form these, continuing on like some of those magical practices of rituals and everything, but implementing that into these like cyclical periods. But so they start to see these things, but not necessarily as opposites how we see them. A lot of times people will think about like concepts like light and dark, like light is superior to dark, but these dualities were seen as like still connected and like two sides of the same coin almost, where it's like these cycles or these natural cycles, and through these rituals they're trying to preserve these cycles or to keep Mother Nature. It's interesting too that they pretty much universally call it like the Mother Earth. The concept of like Gaia and all that is and the moon too, but the mother stuff and like the feminine energy stuff like ties into that archetype. So a lot of that stuff's really interesting, but I don't want to dive too deep into it because I'm going to run out of time. I want to get through this whole thing and then talk about like the politics side of it. So yeah, where were we? We're in the blue, right? So yeah, societies begin to value law, duty, higher moral purpose, and today this phase is like figuring out how to adhere to social norms, what the social norms are, religious practices, the laws of just all that, and really settling into it as a person and understanding how it works. And obviously, like some people have trouble with this. Like people with like developmental disorders, they might not progress fully into this phase. But the next one, so this is going back to the community focus. Coming out of that, you got this orange, right? orange values is the V meme there is about now that you've figured out the rules and how this system works that you're in, you now like start to figure out as an individual how do you better navigate it and take advantage and like kind of where can you maybe like bend the rules or break the rules, cut corners or whatever. How can you strategize maneuvering through this system to better set yourself up for success and thriving and all that. And that's more of a like a I would say it's like it reminds me of like libertarian type of philosophy. Yeah. So 21 to 40 years around, and it's like heavy emphasis on like logic and rationality and individualism, like self-expression, maybe personal achievement, education, wealth building, all that stuff. Scientific inquiry too. All that stuff becomes like really prominent in that phase, and yeah, it's like a really objective, thought-focused time of people's life. So a lot of people, I feel like they go through that. I think this age range we had was like early 20s all the way through maybe 40s. But like I said, it's different for everybody. I feel like a lot of teenagers, like young guys, go through this, and it's like maybe it is college age, like early college age. They go through their like Ayn Rand phase. That's why I always think of it as like a libertarian type of thing. So this would definitely be in the Gene Gebser's mental structure, but it's like in a later phase that he thinks that we're still in right now, that he calls the deficient mode of the mental structure, where it's kind of like become detached. I mean, he had deficient modes of the other ones too, but it's pretty much like pretending that it's untethered from all the rest of it, whereas like science thinks that it's like superseded philosophy and superseded like superstition, and that stuff doesn't matter anymore because science has like invalidated all of it, for instance. So yeah, it started in Enlightenment and went through the Industrial Revolution. I think all this stuff, what's really interesting about like these currents of history, things that we talk about a lot, is that we like the birth of liberalism and like the way that we do everything now started out of this. And whereas like the medieval period was more characterized by the blue game. The next one is the green, and from what the first book that I read that had anything to do with any of this stuff was Ken Wilber. So I found out about spiral dynamics from Ken Wilber, and then I went back and read Claire Graves and Don Beck. And Ken Wilber talks about the green values emerging like in the 60s counterculture in the United States. So it's pretty new. And he says most people develop into this phase like in their 30s to maybe even into their 60s, older age, depending on how old they are and if they even develop into this stage. A lot of people still, they don't even leave the blue, or they they'll go into the orange and they'll just stay in the orange. So it's an ongoing process, right? And anyways, back to the green. So the green is characterized by this focus on like global egalitarianism and empathy and like embracing the whole of humanity with this focus on community bonding and peace and love and all the hippie stuff. So if you think about it, all of these in a way are like a reaction to the one before, with the exception of maybe the purple, which is like the emergence of anything conscious in the first place. So like red is kind of reactive to the purple, and then blue is reactive to the red, and then orange is reactive to the blue, and then green is reactive to the orange. It's trying to like it's like a pendulum. It's trying to correct some of the deficiencies. It's like an idea too that is really big in Hegel and Marx with the dialectic process. But so the green is trying to curtail some of that ego focus of the orange, where it's people are getting mega rich and they're exploiting all these people and taking advantage of them, and these people like grow some moral conscience and they're like, no, that's wrong, we got to stop doing that, we got to put some kind of brakes on that. So the problem with the green though, like, because it might seem especially to people in that phase, it might seem like that's the end, that's like where we all need to end up. As soon as we all get there, like, that's great. But green is this is something I was writing about too. This is like why I'm a little stumped about it right now, because I watched that video and this guy is talking about some real similar ideas that threw me off, because he's I respect the dude, but he's really like vindicating radical traditionalism, which is kind of throws me for a loop. But they do talk about that in his criticism. He's really big into Gebser and those kind of things, like me. But so the criticism is that the left. So first of all, Marx and the left theory and all that stuff kind of emerged, like we were saying, as a reaction to this like overemphasis on materialism, like corporate culture and all that capitalism stuff. So it emerged as in the same time period where this worldview kind of shifted to this material focus and this like logic, reason focus. It's funny too, because Marx, he even calls his theory dialectical materialism. So Hegel had the dialectic process, but Hegel was an idealist, which means he thought the world was fundamentally made of ideas. But that was not really like the paradigm of the age. People were pushing aside superstition and like metaphysics. They were attacking metaphysics, and nobody wanted to believe in that. So what Marx did was he basically took Hegel's idea of the dialectic and applied it to social class, and which Hegel kind of did also. He had a theory called the Lord and the Bondsman, which is very similar to like the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, what Marx called it. But Marx called his scientific, he called it a scientific theory, and the name of the theory was dialectical materialism. So all these ideas are founded in this kind of like post-enlightenment worldview, where the world is like very rational and materialist and everything. So in the beginning, a lot of these like leftist movements were based around Marx. Not all of them. There was other thinkers prior to him, left wing. So not all of it, but pretty much the main body like rallied around that. And the implementation of it in the world too, like the USSR and China and everything. So eventually the left started shifting away from that into some of the stuff that was going on in France in the 50s and 60s, the Derrida, Foucault, and like the postmodern movement, which really challenged the whole like meta-narrative of Marxism and the idea that any of this is built on some kind of like motif or theme in human nature or human history that's like leading to some place. They really rejected the idea that meta-narrative was valid, and that like there was anything like teleological going on, that we were yeah he was super proactive. Marx was he set out like with the intention to stir the pot. So I think you're right. That's like another reason he was so pervasive in the whole movement. But if you look on the little racetrack that they got, it says relativistic, and I think that's why they say that, because it's the left movement got like wrapped up in this postmodernist shift, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I noticed it in a lot of political theorists that I was reading, back at the time, like G.A. Cohen. He started out as a hardcore Marxist. He wrote books on Marx theory, and then by the end of his life, the very last book he wrote, he was wondering, like, is this even feasible? I really do like his last book that he wrote. It's really short, but he started questioning like the feasibility of implementing something like that, and I saw it in some others too. And then Mark Fisher, the late Mark Fisher, he got pretty popular. He started out as a blogger, but he was like full on postmodernist, post-structuralist, and he had some really interesting ideas. But I think a lot of this led to this kind of like ungrounding of values, like where it's like everything kind of becomes like socially constructed, and cultural relativism is like a huge defining factor of that. And it I think it just led to some really interesting and like conflicting views like within the movement itself, where it's people they don't want to accept that any of that stuff is like rooted in reality at all. Basically, people can just make up whatever they want, more or less, and it's like a battle of ideas. And that, it kind of seems like when you say it that way that it's like not based in materialism, but I think all this stuff is reactive. Maybe it's kind of shifting away from it a little bit at that point, but the big thing isn't just like the lack of any kind of concrete values per se. It's like they form this kind of narrative stuff, and like I don't know, man. There's so much like infighting and like persecution in the left. A lot of I see a lot of leftists, like whenever they start to get some kind of attention on social media, or they start to like emerge as like a leader figure, they get attacked for different things. Like they said something wrong, or they have this thing in their past like where they weren't like totally aligned with whatever the majority of the community is aligned with at the time, and because of that they get shut down. And I think it comes out of this like in the postmodernists, in the Foucault and Derrida, there's this like huge rejection of hierarchy. Like that's the whole thing with the like egalitarianism. It's like this radical flattening of all hierarchy. And a lot of people even say that's what the left is. It's like the right is defined by hierarchy and the left is like anti-hierarchy. But I mean, I don't look at it that way, but I know a lot of people do, and I think there is a huge aversion to that, to the point where even when people start getting noticed or getting viral on social media, like even the girl I brought up earlier, the so cutesy demure girl, I've seen a lot of people tearing into her for she's trans, but they're saying like, oh, she doesn't inside the trans community, she's getting criticized by some folks for not recognizing non-binary people as like legitimate or something like that. Just stuff like that, where it's like like, screw you, you're not one of us anymore, like we don't accept you. And I feel like it's really pernicious, and it's like a symptom of that. And Ken Wilber, and he criticizes it a lot. What they call the green meme here. He says like, yeah, they have a big focus on civil rights, environmentalism, social justice, um, but they have this kind of self contradiction thing going on where it's like, you guys can believe anything you want, like anything, like you can be anything you want, you can do anything you want, as long as you believe that anybody's allowed to do anything they want. So it's like you have to accept this one thing, And anyways, he talks about this next, like, yellow, I guess they call it here. They're different in both, like in spiral dynamics and then in integral, the AQAL, which is Ken Wilber's. The color scheme is different, so it gets a little confusing. But he calls this the tier 2 shift. I think it shows it like on this picture in just like little tiny letters. Maybe I can make it. Can I zoom in here or something? Yeah. So yeah, you see here it says first tier memes, second tier V memes. So the tier 2 shift, the transition from first to second, is so it's like this huge leap in this shift in consciousness from getting out of the habit of looking down on the people that came before you. So green is reactionary to orange, and they tend to look down at orange like, these people are screwing up the whole world. They need to hurry up and get to green. And then the orange are doing that to the blue. I mean, really the green's doing that to everybody who's underneath the green. Orange is doing that to everybody who's underneath the orange and also to the green. Blue's doing that to everybody who's above and below them. Red's doing that to everybody who's below and above them. So it's just a lot of people thinking that everybody else is, not where they're supposed to be because they're not seeing the world in the same way. So the tier 2, this radical shift, comes in seeing that these are actually developmental phases that people and cultures have to go through. This is like why implementing democracy in Afghanistan didn't work, because they're somewhere in here, like in between red and blue, in their culture, and you're trying to take them like straight to orange, or maybe even to orange green, somewhere in here, and you can't do that. You can't just magically transport yourself. You have to develop through all these phases, just like they were talking about with the human development. Like your age, your expected ages. So yellow, a lot of people, they don't even get to that point, but they're saying like expected age, at least at the time when he wrote the book, was 50 plus years. I think there's probably a lot of kids that might be getting into that phase a lot earlier now. Like Gen Z kids will probably get into that, I mean, it depends on so many factors, right? But, just given their access to information and seeing what's going on in the world, I think it's, they have more opportunity to develop into those stages faster than our parents did, for instance. And that's nothing against our parents. It doesn't mean that they're stupid. It's just the world was different and they didn't have the same opportunity to be aware of what was going on in the world quite as much. Some people did, like a lot more. I heard people back then talking about things, like some of the political, like if you watch the movie Bulworth, it was made in, I think it was made in the 80s, like a Warren Beatty movie. And they're talking about like how corrupt the political parties are, and the Democrats and the Republicans are like rigging everything against everybody. Like that was something that not a lot of people were talking about back then. But there were people that had awareness of things, that other people didn't. And I think, I think some of these like great figures, leaders in history, maybe even like they did get into these like yellow or tier 2 shift worldviews, like a long time ago. And they're the ones who kind of like help push us forward and bring these things into greater human consciousness. But like everybody has their limits, like a historical spiritual leader that was born thousands of years ago won't be able to bring as much into human consciousness as people are today. Like the opportunity is not as much, even though their impact might be a lot greater. You know what I mean? So yellow is like an emerging thing, and it's really cool. I meant to get this stuff for you guys, but I didn't get around to it. In one of Ken Wilber's books, he talks about he gives like a breakdown of how many people he thinks in the United States. I think it's only in the United States. Like what percentage of people are in what group, and how much percent of the power that they have politically. And that basically our culture is mostly blue, orange, and green. Like mostly orange, to be honest. But you still have some blue. That's like the evangelicals and like hardcore, like old school Christians. And maybe some other religious groups as well. But and then green is like your kind of the left, and then orange is everybody else like in between. A lot of the orange are also right wing, but some of them are not. Some of them are centrist. Some of them are maybe even like split, where they're like fiscally conservative, socially liberal. It's like a whole process. It's not like I think of it like like taxonomy and like speciation stuff and evolution, where it's like, how do you know when it becomes a new species? It like takes all this time to develop. There's no like distinct line. It's a very vague concept. And I think that's why these things kind of help us, but it's not like a black and white thing that you can point at and be like, this person's here. And I think that's why it's good to not try to use it as like a way to browbeat people or judge people or like sort people into categories of like what kind of access they get to certain things or whatever. But anyways, so yellow, obviously yellow, like we were talking, goes back to like a more ego, like personal focus. And then turquoise comes back to like a community, like globalist view. So honestly, like if I had to give myself like a real good honest self-assessment of like where I might be in this process, I think I've been in green for quite a while, and I'm like barely starting to come into yellow. Like I have awareness of it and I'm like moving there, but I'm still kind of reluctant because I don't want to, well, first of all, I don't want to like go back into the right wing that I've been opposing, for so long. But I'm not against it. I see there's a lot of things there that I do agree with, like having, I don't think it's a bad idea to have family values. I don't think it's a bad idea to have work ethic. But at the same time, I don't want to like shift too hard and fast into like ego focus and being like being selfish or whatever. So I have like a version to that that's habituated in the green, and I think that's where I'm at. And like I was saying, sometimes like you slip back into different levels of this depending on where you're at. I think a lot about like down here lower in the beige and the purple and everything. I think like you can get into those, especially like the beige. Like when you're like, if you ever done like combat sports or you get in a fight, I think you go straight back into there. And that's why I was saying you can see how it's kind of based in the Maslow hierarchy. It's like if your basic needs are threatened, you go back down to the bottom of the pyramid, and then if you're like social, emotional needs aren't being met, you go back to that level to try to seek those things out. So I think that happens a lot. People get they get in need of these things, and sometimes they'll latch back onto something that they think that they lost, and maybe that helps them move up in the process too. Maybe they like re-embrace religion, and they, to you it looks like they're going back into blue, and they're like reverting, but actually they're going, up into turquoise or to green or something. So that's what I was saying. It's really hard to judge people. I think it's just a conceptual framework. It's like everything else. It's like the political compass test or the right left dichotomy. None of that shit is real. It's all made up. It's like conceptual framework to help us visualize in our mind's eye, to conceptualize these ideas and how they work. So anyways, that's like the big rundown of the spiral dynamics. Let me pull up this other. I got another one here. It's similar, but that shows like the actual spiral itself. So they really visualize it and like paint this imagery of it being like a spiral. They love this spiral thing, and this kind of explains the levels again: the beige, the purple, the orange, the blue, or the red, the blue. Sorry, the orange, the green, the yellow, the turquoise, and then the coral is like a. They basically say that we don't even know what that is yet. It hasn't maybe there's a few people that are hitting that, but it hasn't emerged quite enough for us to know. Back to the whole Gebser idea. He noticed, so he was writing in the 40s, but he said that he noticed there was a new consciousness structure emerging in human development, and he called it the integral structure. I think that's why these guys call this integral theory. Well, why Ken Wilber in the AQAL calls it integral theory, that he took the spiral dynamics and kind of, ran with it and tied it into a bunch of philosophy and psychology and stuff, other psychology. But I think he's working off of that concept, the Gebser concept of this next phase. I think Tree, I think you called it. The Age of Aquarius, which is great. Let me catch up on you. Yeah. Family values and work ethic feel like leftist values. Yeah, I've seen that. Mark Fisher talks about that too, how capitalism's inherently destructive to the family, and it puts labor pressure, basically now both the parents have to leave the home to work, and it is disruptive to the family. So it's kind of ironic that people that are in the blue meme are blaming people that are in the green meme for ruining all this stuff, when it's actually the orange kind of stuff that's going on. But yeah, it's interesting to think about. Me and Brady were kind of talking last night about it, where I think it's maybe not even a right or left thing. I think it's a human thing, but it's just a failure to really understand what's happening in culture and society. And I wanted to get into that a bit more. After I watched this video and all that stuff, I've just been sitting here reading and writing and going crazy. I wrote this guy some, what was that? That's Always Sunny, where the guys got the things says the Pepe Sylvia, I wrote him like 7 or 8 comments on his stuff, freaking out. It's yeah, that thing really got me. But here's a free ebook, y'all. Spiral dynamic stuff. Yeah, I think that's interesting too, Tree, that conservatism takes it a step further with the purity culture stuff. Because the blue meme folks are more cohesive in a smaller group, a religious community. And a lot of that stuff is based in that. But it's crazy when you talk about conservatism as a whole, because it's incorporating through various levels of that. You know what I mean? It has a lot of the orange and a lot of the blue. So it gets really it turns into a quagmire really quick. I think a lot of that stuff is coming from the evangelicals, which are obviously the blue. So the all quadrants, all levels thing is the Ken Wilber stuff. So he like developed this even further, and he kind of applied some philosophy ideas to it. Where so up here in this corner, he's talking about the quadrants. That's what the AQAL is. All quadrants, all levels, all stages, all states, all lines. I mean, it's all this, but this is obviously, you can see it's the spiral dynamics phases. That's what he means by all levels. The all quadrants is this. So you have individual and group, which we were already talking about, how the spiral goes back and forth from that. But he adds this, he adds this other axis here, which is the interior or exterior scale. So stuff that falls in this quadrant is your individual interior, so like your internal thoughts and internal experience of the world, like subjective psychology, spirituality, all that. And then this, on this side, is individual experience of the world, but externalized. So, and then this bottom is the same thing, but for group. So the way he does it is he takes the spiral dynamic stuff and like applies it in like a broader conception to try to. He's really trying to build like a framework for people to use the spiral dynamics and the like developmental theory to try to help like move more people up the spiral, basically. And like, how can we use this in like education for like kids to move them up faster? How can we use it in politics? How can we use it in, this field or that field? Like in leadership and like corporate leadership or whatever. So one thing I can say about him is that he went through some controversy because he started a whole organization based on this. And they were like advising, world leaders and organizations and stuff. And there were some people in the organization that claimed that it turned into just like a disaster. It was an internal hierarchy based on these levels because they were trying to sort everybody out internally by these levels. Not necessarily that Ken Wilber himself was doing that, but that the kind of internal structure ended up developing around like who's on what level. So like we don't want somebody who's on a lower level to be in charge of this project or that kind of stuff. And it was like kind of like culty vibes, I guess. So I don't know, just I guess that's something to take into consideration when you're like reading and like looking into all his stuff. But I still think it's I think it's a good place to start, dipping your toes into this whole like integral theory, human consciousness development stuff. Whether you like want to adhere more strictly to the Ken Wilber framework or you want to, just like take it for what it is and maybe kind of apply some of the ideas. I think that's fine because he talks about that he talks about that a lot. He says like part of a truly integral framework is that you have to accept the fact that like your theory, your philosophical theory, is not going to be 100% comprehensive. Like you have to leave room for it to grow and develop and accommodate like future development stuff. So it's never going to be complete. But anyways, he wrote a lot about politics and integral politics and how he applies this AQAL framework to political systems to create like more involved, like a holistic view of how these groups interact with each other and how to get people to talk to each other and like building bridges instead of creating more conflict and everything. But I think all of this stuff really, and I feel like I need to talk about this. Just kind of like throw this because I wrote a bunch of kind of like key script points about the AQAL and integral politics. But I kind of want to talk. I kind of just want to go off of that and talk about like this other stuff that threw me for a loop, because what he was really talking about is the emergence of this kind of new mode of thought. It's like it's like transcending the paradigm of the Enlightenment era materialist, scientific reductionist worldview. You know what I mean? Because I really feel like the left-right dichotomy is based in that. And just like growing up with that and like doing so much thought inside of that paradigm, it makes it hard to think outside of that. You know, it's like whenever I talk to people about politics, especially people who aren't like into like political theory or anything, they might just like argue a little bit on the Facebook, or they, you know, they watch the news, or they might even be one of those, but they don't like to talk about it. But if you do get into conversations with most people about politics, like usually the first thing they want to try to get to is like, who are you going to vote for? And I just feel like it's so just like limiting. It's just so limited and like myopic, like the view of what's actually possible. Because I don't feel like it has to fall within like the political compass framework or any of those kind of like conceptual tools. I think they can be helpful in some ways, like especially when you're going through these phases to try to figure out your, you know, like your political identity and all that, and how to navigate all that stuff, and you know what makes somebody like an anarchist, what makes somebody a democratic socialist or whatever. But I feel like I think me and Brady talked about this a little bit last night too. Like it's almost like I've started like recently conceptualizing it kind of like more like a sphere. I don't know. I need to try to like draw some diagrams of this kind of stuff, or just like start drawing it with pencil and paper. But yeah, I feel like a lot of those values and just like basic human things are shared across the spectrum, you know? Like we were talking about the work ethic and the family values and all that kind of stuff. But a lot of the stuff that seems contradictory is just like reactionary, which a lot of these like going through these levels are. So anyways, when all that stuff emerged, all that like materialism stuff, it started this phase in philosophy that you know went through all these stages of development, but it, you know, so for instance, Rene Descartes, they call him the father of modern philosophy. He is famous for that cogito ergo sum, I think therefore I am. Right? And he, if you think about that, right, if you think about the way he did that, it seems like a pretty good way to go about it. It seems like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, I'm going to be skeptical. I'm going to doubt everything I can doubt. But I have to at least accept the fact that I exist, right? Because if not, how am I thinking about this question in the first place? So that's like where he starts. But if you think about that, that starting point is 100% ego focused, which was like so much stuff in human consciousness and development had to lead up to that. But I think that's why it's a point of delineation that they make, because that kicked off like a whole revolution in philosophy where people started building on and responding to his theory. What happened was it split. It like bifurcated your view of the world into mind and matter. Before that, it wasn't like a big problem. And in Eastern philosophy, it's never been a problem. They don't argue about that stuff at all because they don't look at them as two different things.
And that's a whole nother like rabbit hole to go down. But so eventually, mind and the world of ideas became like subjugated to the materialist, physicalist world. Like that whole theory of what the world is made of, out of the ontology of the world, became focused on physicalism and this idea that the world is made of like just like these little particles, like little BBs that just bounce off each other and interact in certain ways to make everything what it is. And, like builds and builds on each other over time, like creates all these like amazing configurations. And there's some truth to that. Like we've come a long way. Oh, you gotta get out here, see a tree. We've come a long way in developing that stuff. And, you figured out so many things, like how to like fit all the whole field of physics and rocketry and all the science, like all the nutrition science, all the medicine, so much stuff. I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad thing, but it was accompanied by this like complete rejection. It led into this eventually. I think it like kind of climaxed in this phase called logical positivism. I think that really captured like the whole essence of the scientific project, because they got to this point where they completely rejected metaphysics altogether. And they were like, it's considered a philosophy of science, but what they say is that what science is doing is it's using empiricism. It's looking at empirical observations of the world to determine what everything is and validate it through this scientific process. So science is telling you what's true and what's not true. And everything else is just bullshit, basically. So, and I think that's the view that a lot of people operate under, especially like the atheism, like the new atheist movement, like the Richard Dawkins and the Sam Harris and Neil deGrasse Tyson, all those guys are pretty obviously in that like frame of reference about how the world works and what science is doing. But there's like a dark side to it, because it's like a complete rejection of a lot of things that a lot of people really believe in and feel that there's something more going on, like psychical phenomenon, like stuff in your dreams, just weird stuff that you can't explain. And there's tons of stuff out there like that. There's even scientists that are working on those kind of things. But as they got further into the quantum physics, quantum mechanics rabbit hole, a lot of that stuff started to unravel. That whole concept that the world is just like physical little particles. And that caused a lot of problems. And then when that happened, there were some philosophers who immediately saw that it was an issue. And they saw like the implications of, the kind of like Einsteinian special theory of relativity, like what that implied for ontology, which is like what is the world made out of. And they started, especially this guy Albert North Whitehead, they started developing theories about how alternative theories of like how all that stuff could work. And I like his a lot. It's called process philosophy. There's so much to it, but it's basically, instead of like starting with this idea that everything out there's like this standing reserve of dead particles of matter, that there's fields that interact with each other, and that there's not like these preset laws. Like there was a computer programmer. God is like a computer programmer that set all these parameters before he pressed start on the simulation, and that was the rules that we started with. And they're like immutable and unchangeable or whatever. Instead, that like what's happening with these interactions and relations between these fields is that they create eventually they create like quantum phenomenon in that way. And then that like it's like a more of a habituation process. You know, you see like that's one of those patterns. I feel like these patterns get repeated through, you know, different levels of things. But you know, you see that with a lot of things, like where like how habit formation works. And like it happens with, you know, like that thing they did with the Tokyo subway where they got the slime mold to find like the most efficient routes, and then they redesigned the subway system based on that. Or like how neural pathways develop. You know, like you strengthen the neural pathways the more you think about it, and then eventually it gets more set. So it was kind of like around ideas like that, you know, that's the way that things form. And that's like a super like cursory general explanation of it, but anyways, you know, Gene Gebser talked about the emergence of something new, like a new kind of paradigm worldview emerging that he saw like back in the 40s. And even right before him, Martin Buber, who was like a really spiritual Jewish philosopher, he wrote about, like, most people remember him for his the part in his major work I and Thou, where he talks about human relations, where he's talking about like basically there's two ways to relate to another person, and one is, you know, you just look at them as like an object, like a thing, and the other is that you look at them like you, like a person. And so a lot of people apply it to like ethics and interpersonal relations stuff, which is great. I think it's like a great concept. It's, you know, it can be life changing. It could be like relationship revolutionizing if you practice that. But he talks about it on other levels too. He talks about it in like human relation to the divine, and he also talks about it in your relation to the world, like to objects in the world, things. And he kind of talks around this idea of ontology, of like the world arising not through like static existing objects, but through the interactions of things. Like the whole act of the creation of reality is kind of like what Whitehead talks about, like that it's a process, and that it depends on the interrelation of things. Like it's a verb, not a noun, basically. So I found that to be really interesting, and I think it kind of ties into some of that stuff, because he talks about, you know, and he was writing this, I think he was writing either in the 30s or also maybe in the earlier 40s when he wrote that book. But he talks about his kind of like predictions for the future, and his observations at the time, where he thought that like because of this focus on individualism and separation and division, and everybody's like, you know, becoming their own person, and they're getting more and more isolated, that it's causing all these like problems with despair and mental health. He doesn't say it in those words, but that's what he's talking about. And he says like kind of we're in this age of like spiritual void, and that he thought that there was like, he was heralding this resurgence of like this spiritual reawakening age, that he thought that was gonna you know, vindicate humanity, basically. You know, he's working off of these kind of like Abrahamic religious ideals also, which that's a big one in Christianity, you know, the like Christ Redeemer and everything. But you know, for what it's worth, I really feel like a lot of those things, a lot of those ideas these guys were talking about are like emerging even more now. You know, there's this huge resurgence in younger people of like their interest in esoterica and astrology and spirituality, and like Carl Jung's psychology and those kind of things. But yeah, before I like kind of try to wrap it up, I know this is like these are like the broad strokes of this stuff, and we could dive so much more deep into these things, especially if I put together a little bit of research and stuff for us to talk about. Is like the inevitability of the like movement into the postmodernist stuff and everything, because if you think about it, if you're starting on that process, this is what I was writing about, like the liberalism, and I wrote a big old Facebook post about it. I'll try to bring it up here. And this is what I want to do this video series on. Well, I don't know if it'll let me make it big here, but so yeah, basically it's like this is just explaining liberalism and like the concept, the foundations of what liberalism is based on. It's kind of the idea of like individual rights and free. There's like really a post-enlightenment concept, like the modern conception of like a representative republic from John Locke, and capitalism from Adam Smith, and then going into the reaction to capitalism from Karl Marx. All that stuff's based in this like materialist, liberal, individualist worldview, where it's like focused on the individual and the individual capacity for reason and logic being superior, and like humanism was a part of it, where it's like focusing on the person instead of focusing on the church, what the church says, what the Catholic Church was telling people to do. So there was a big shift, in Western cultural consciousness that led into liberalism. But when you're starting with that like Cartesian, self-focus and this individual focus, and it's funny because leftists will criticize that as like a right-wing idea, that like rugged individualism and pull yourself up by your bootstraps, which, I mean, it is. It's like they love that shit, but it's really this. Like all these countries in Europe and the US and Canada, they're all liberal democracies. They all hold these same principles at their core of like the autonomy and freedom and the rights of the individual. And they're kind of looking at every individual as like an atom in the makeup of society. So like you put a bunch of people together, they use their rational faculties and their logic to try to like act in their own self-interest, if you're following the Adam Smith stuff, and like economic exchange and all that. And it all works itself out for the best because everybody comes to this kind of agreement. They enter into this social contract where they, as long as everybody's like acting in earnest and acting in their self-interest, they'll work it out to where it works best for everybody. And that's like the belief, the core belief of what liberalism is. But there's been a lot of stuff showing that people don't. That's not how humans work. They don't always act in their self-interest. They don't always act rationally. There's a lot of more animalism and stuff, and there was a lot of work done in that period too to try to like distinguish people from animals as like special because they have reason. And a lot of it was based like in Christianity, but I think it was like disruptive to the project, the deeper project of Christianity. I think even as far back as probably like the Roman bureaucratic takeover of Christianity, that it got kind of thrown off, like of what it was originally trying to do. But anyways, so. Like, if you think about what post-structuralism is and postmodernism is, it is like an inevitable consequence of that, because it's basically it's trying to give everybody their max like freedom and say like, you're an individual, you can do anything that you want to do in life, like just if you believe it, you can be it type of shit, And it's just not, that's not how it works. You know, it's led to this huge like fragmentation and isolation, and just like it's like society is disintegrating instead of like what they thought was going to happen. It's just like it's causing this huge like disintegration, and like all these like terrible, you know, mental health problems and that kind of stuff. And I'm not saying that that's like because of postmodernism or because of leftists or because of right-wing people or whatever. I'm saying it's because of this way of thinking in general. And the way out that I'm envisioning has less to do with like right-wing, left-wing politics and more to do with getting past that way of thinking, you know, into this new way of thinking that we don't even really know fully what it is yet. But we know that it has something to do with like reintegrating and re-embracing some of those ideas that we left behind back before. And you know, that we kind of like threw the baby out with the bathwater in a way, you know. And I don't know. It's something that really excites me, but it's also kind of scary too, in some ways, especially after watching that video. So maybe next time, actually, I can probably share it in the group, and maybe next time we can talk about the video and everything. And I'll start, you know, blasting out some video content, trying to explain some of this stuff in less of a unscripted, willy-nilly way, and maybe get some like imagery and diagrams and everything going. Got some work to do, but I don't know. It seems like there's a few people still here. If anybody wants to talk about anything, man, or you got questions, you got feedback, you think I'm full of shit, like, let me know what you guys are thinking. Not, I'll wrap her up. About to hit hour and a half right now. Whoa. Man, I haven't played a video game in like a month almost. Been so busy with this shit trying to get out of the Navy, and I don't know, I've just been going crazy, reading and writing. It's been wild lately. I was trying to stream, you know, like at least a couple times a week. I just haven't had time. Oh, thanks, Tree. You're still here. Yeah, I took your feedback to heart. I've been trying to like, you know, make small improvements here and there. You know, I feel like I'm not doing enough, but you know, that's just negative self-talk, I think. Oh, nice. Yeah, how's school going and everything? You said you were getting run pretty ragged, huh? No, I just noticed that was my computer background. Where's it at? I think I made that shit on Midjourney or something. I've been fucking with this AI art shit for like some blog posts and stuff. Yeah, you feel like you're gonna be all right? Oh, my neck is. Did you hear that? Blame that on my disability. My neck is not great. Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Oh, Audra hates it when I do that. She thinks I'm gonna hurt myself. When's your first exam? Yeah, I went to a chiropractor for a little bit. I didn't think it was really doing anything. He gave me some stuff to do at home or whatever. But my I have a hernia or not a herniated. I have a bulging disc. Herniated is worse, huh? I have a bulging disc like in my L spine, and my like primary care doctor was like, "No, I don't want you to go to the chiropractor anymore. They might like fuck that shit up even worse." Oh yeah, that's good. And my daughter starts her classes tomorrow. I'm really excited to go back to school actually, because like I just kind of love the environment. I was such like I don't know, I was like really enthusiastic about like all the philosophy classes and everything, and even like the bio and like my gen ed stuff. I had to take some bio stuff like anatomy and biology, basic biology. But I remember I was like emailing my professors all the time and asking them questions, and they were like, "Dude, like, what are you doing here? Like, are you really a student?" Cornell note taking. Yeah, I haven't heard of that. I mean, it sounds kind of familiar, but yeah, like stenography or something. Yeah, I know. That's what you did originally, right? I love biology. I mean, I'm like a hack in everything. I'm like a jack of all trades. I'm not really an expert in anything. Like, I mean, I did philosophy undergrad, but like that's philosophy. Philosophy's whatever. You could, especially in undergrad, dude. You could just, you could just, you don't have to read shit. You could just say like, "Oh, that's bullshit," and you'll still pass. It's like, fucking, it's crazy. Oh, nice. Yeah, I'll show it to her. Yeah, I'm almost sure her first class is tomorrow. Yeah, I always just like brute forced it. I would just write down random chicken scratch shit, and somehow I made it work. Sometimes I would record shit too, like on my phone and stuff. When I went to like in person classes, I'll just like record what they said on like a voice note, and then I would try to convert it later. But yeah, I love that shit. Like I love the idea of it, the concept of saving time and making it more efficient. Oh, nice. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's cool. Yeah. You guys still playing First Descendant at all? Or you been too busy? I've been too busy. I haven't played shit. I haven't done shit. It says we got 4 people here. I wonder who's still here lurking. What's the benefit of going AFK and Conan? I remember I tried to play that with you for a little bit. Like I started building some shit and I thought I was doing all right, and then some dude just came and fucking murdered me and took all my shit. I'm pretty sure he was naked too. I was like, what the fuck, man? Did you catch any of that wrap up stuff about like the oh my god, what is happening? They're sending me invitations or something. Did you catch any of that wrap up stuff about like the like post liberalism and like kind of liberalism and like the core tenets of liberalism being, you know, problematic in a way, like feeling like they lead to inevitably to like the postmodernism stuff, because that's like an extreme end point of that, like hyper individualism, like saying that everybody just gets to do and be whatever they want, like whatever they can imagine. That's all good, yeah. Maybe I'm gonna try to make some clips and stuff. Send you some. Yeah. I mean, that's like what I'm really on right now, but I'm kind of bummed because this dude I really like, he's one of the best like YouTube philosophy people I've ever seen. Like he's just like every video he was making, because most of the stuff he was making is, he's a little bit more on the like esoterica side of stuff than me. He's like into astrology and, you know, some, like he's really into all that stuff, like the mythical and like mystical stuff. But almost everything he's ever said about like all that ontology, like what the world is made of and how all that shit works, and his kind of like theory that he's developing around all that, like I've just been, dude, this is so awesome to hear somebody talking about this shit who like knows more about it than me, and they're like, he was just getting me hyped about it. But last night he put out a video. It's like his first video. Yeah, I love all that shit, like hermeneutics and all that. Like he's way more into it than me. I appreciate it. Spirituality, even like Christianity. But he finally, oh Blake, man, thanks for hanging out, dude. I didn't know if you were here listening, man, but I appreciate you coming by, dude. I'll hit you up on Messenger, man, so we can talk some more. We're gonna work something out to see each other, dude. Love you, man. But yeah, he, for the first time in all the videos that I've been following, he's only been making stuff for maybe like a year, and he made one last night. I just saw it earlier today. It really threw me for a loop because it's the first time he talked about politics stuff. I was like, fuck yeah, dude, that's my jam, dude. That's like, you know, that's my shit. But he ended up like, I don't really know. He doesn't like come out as like being right wing or left wing or any of that. He doesn't like explicitly say any of that stuff. But just from the impression I got from it, because he's really talking a lot about traditional, radical traditionalism, which I've seen a lot of those pages and like Instagram accounts and stuff. A lot of them are like super racist and fascist and like misogynist and everything. But he was like praising radical traditionalism a lot. I mean, mainly for like some of the spiritual and like pre-enlightenment stuff that they're into. Because, you know, they'll like, I mean, there's lots of different ones. They'll champion like Roman culture. They'll champion like, you know, some of them are like 50s culture. You know, whatever. They'll like champion certain, but it's all pretty much, all of them are pretty unanimous on like some of the like red pilled kind of shit. It is like, oh, it's just so like gross to me. And so it was really hard for me to listen to. But, and then he's also like throwing some praise at Jordan Peterson, which I'm not against either. Like, I've heard Jordan Peterson say some things, and I know he's a Jungian, because that guy loves Carl Jung. I know Jordan Peterson's like main academia is like his field of expertise is Jungian psychology. So I can see why he had some interest in him and like some of the things that he has to say, but he kind of identifies Jordan Peterson as like this new spiritual leader who's like reintroducing like a postmodernism spirituality. It's like based in Jungian psychology, and I don't know. It was just really like, it's like because I know the guy's really smart, and I appreciate a lot of what he has to say, even in that video. But at the same time, I don't want to get like sucked into some kind of like bullshit. You know, I don't want to go there. But yeah. I don't know. I'm scared. Fuck it. I guess we'll see. I guess we'll see where it goes. You know. All right. Cool. I'll let you go. I'm sure you probably want to sleep, huh? I'm gonna try to chop this stuff up. I recorded this whole thing. I'll try to chop it up and make some video clips and send some stuff your way. Yeah, man. Thanks for being here. Catch you later.